Hi, I'm Karen Stobbe, and I'm very pleased to be with you today. We're going to be talking about using improv to navigate these plot twists that are caregiving. But a little bit more about myself before we get going. In that, here's a picture of my mom and dad. That is Manny and Virginia Stobbe. My dad was diagnosed in 1994 of Alzheimer's, and he passed away in October of 2000. And my mom was diagnosed a year and a half later. She lived with us for almost 11 years, and she just passed away 3 years ago. So I've got a little bit of experience in family caregiving, and that's what I want to talk to you about today is just overall caregiving. And so a few things before we move forward is that you have to remember that everybody is different. No matter what, if you are in a room full of people and all of your care receivers, your loved ones have cerebral palsy, they all have Alzheimer's, they all have intellectual developmental disabilities, doesn't matter. They're all different, and you are all different. Every caregiver is different. So everything is approached maybe in just a little bit different of a way. There's no recipe or roadmap that you can follow. Everything is really individualized. And I think when I first started the journey, I thought it was going to be something like this, kind of this nice little caregiving to have ups and downs and things like that. But after a few years in, I realized it's really more like this. And I bet most of you can agree. So let's get going here. If you see this, what do you think it says? It's okay. You can say it out loud. Okay, right? When in actuality, I was being kind of a sneak. And here's what it really says. And I think that no matter what, those that we are caring for are doing their best. What are they doing? They're trying to just fill in those blanks. So they see something and they're just trying to fill it in. They're trying to be as normal as they can. So I think that if you learn how to communicate, then you'll have more room for joy. And I think you'll get that as we go along in this talk a little bit. And my dad always said, there's always room for Jello. That's why my little picture of Jello is there. But there's always room for joy. We just have to make the room. So we're going to talk just a little bit about communication. And one quick tip that I find so important is something I got from Dr. Al Power. He's written many books, two of them, Dementia Beyond Drugs and Dementia Beyond Disease, are wonderful. But he talks about, just a small little paragraph, that when he was a young geriatrician, he was making his rounds in a nursing home. And he would open the door and stick his foot in the door and say, "Oh, Mrs. Adams, how are you? Could I do anything?" And before he even got words out of his mouth, Miss Adams, who was laying in bed, would say, "Oh, no, doctor, I'm fine. You go help the other people who are sick." So he, okay, and went out and went to the next door, and he kept getting that same response. "Don't worry about me, doctor. Go help so-and-so down the hall or across in the other wing." And he thought about it, and he realized that he needed to change his behavior. So he brought in a folding chair and he knocked on the door and he said, "May I come in?" And he went in and he opened the chair, and wherever the person was, whether they were in bed or sitting in their lazy boy or in a rocking chair by the window, he would sit with them and he would look at them. And what he realized that was doing was it was giving them a better opportunity to communicate. They were at eye level. They were eye to eye. It also gave this message that they are equals, that one is not better than the other, that one is not looking down and making the other person look up. that they are equals. But the biggest one is when you sit down, don't just sit. Let that sigh go out. Because what that says is, I have time for you. And it's such a simple, simple thing, but I feel like it is so huge. I have time for you. How many people who we are caring for don't feel like anyone has any time for them? Then I think that feeds into listening. And I think that when we listen, we have to listen with our whole body, mind, and soul. And sometimes that really is not that easy. But there's this great statistic that says people will take away from you when you're talking 55%, 55 of your body language and your facial expressions, 38% of your voice, your vocal characteristics, like your tone, your volume, your inflection, and then 7% of your actual words. So when you think about that, and the person that you're helping to care for, think about how big that body language and facial expression is for that person that's trying to listen to you and you're trying to listen to them. And I love this picture here. It's a Chinese character of to listen. And it's not just, as you can see, one little character. It is the ears, it's the eyes, it's the heart, it's attention. It's also, there's one line here, that character that means king, that you're supposed to treat the person to whom you're listening to as if they were a king or a queen. That's how much you should pay attention to them. There was this one time when I was doing some storytelling workshops, and I was going around greeting the people in the circle. And these were all people that were living in a nursing home. And when I got down to greet Miss Ruth, I got down and I looked her right in her eyes and I said, I'm so glad you're here with us today, Miss Ruth. And she looked at me and she said, oh, well, you're the first person to look at me today. And I know she didn't mean look at her, but I think she meant really eye level, eye to eye, to look at her. How simple is that, though, to pay your respect to another person by just looking eye to eye? And then another really good listening principle, I suppose, listen to their emotional content. No matter who the person is you're caring for, if a person says, wow, I feel great today, I don't think I would believe their words. I think I would go back to that statistic and believe their vocal characteristics and their body language. So pay attention to that emotional content that's behind their words so that you can really figure out what's going on with the person. Also, here's a nice little trick of a few things you can say to help someone when you can tell they're not feeling well, or they're frustrated, or they're angry, or they're sad. But to identify that emotion. So it might be something like, I see you're feeling sad, and then add on, I'm so sorry. I see you're feeling sad. Is there anything I can do? I see you're feeling frustrated. How can I help you? So those moments of recognizing the emotion the person's having and then adding on, what can you do? How can you help that person to feel better? And now speak, right? Let's think about a few things to help you when you're speaking to your care receiver, the person that you help care for. So one is, no matter what, just don't interrupt. Sometimes that person might be having trouble trying to find their words. And as they're trying to get their words out, we interrupt them. We think we know what they're about to say, or we think we have something more important, and we interrupt. Just don't. Adjust your attitude before you start to speak. Make sure that you are in a good place, that you're not angry, upset, sad. Start from a neutral place when you're communicating, and that your attitude isn't rubbing off on them. And one step at a time. Maybe it's instructions you're trying to give. Maybe it's truly one step at a time. Maybe it's slowing down and taking one step at a time when you're helping the person to walk across the room or to the car or into the doctor's office. But remember that slow down with that one step at a time. And don't ask questions that the person can't answer, whether they don't know them or they can't recall them. It's really important. I don't know how you might feel, but if you're asked questions over and over and you don't know the answer, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get a little upset maybe. It's hard to have someone almost quizzing you and you don't know any of the answers. So be aware of doing that yourself as a caregiver. And, this is a big one. Arguing doesn't help anyone. Just don't argue. It is never good. It never helps a situation. Just move forward. And what if, in moving forward, we responded with the words, yes, and? Now, yes, and is a big guideline in the world of improv. And when you think about saying yes and in improv, it's really about never saying no to someone on stage, never denying their thoughts, their ideas, what they want to do or say. So for instance, if someone walked up to me on stage doing improv and said, Karen, what a nice duck you have on your head. And I said, I don't have a duck on my head. And they said, yes, you do. And I said, no, I don't. Yes, you do. Well, it just turns into this argument. And that's no fun. Not for anybody. Not for the audience. But if someone walked up and said, Karen, what a nice duck you have on your head. And I said, oh, thank you so much. Look at the dance it makes you do when you wear it. Well, that was interesting. I took that suggestion of theirs and I added to it. And then I gave them an action that they could actually do. So when you think about that yes and, how can we use that in a positive manner for those that we care for? Someone says, I want to go home, if it's someone that's living with dementia. And you say, yes, and tell me about your home. I've never had somebody turn me down on that one. Everybody has always told me about that home that they're thinking about. And most of the time, it's not the home that they're in now, or maybe they just left. It's the home from 30, 40, 60 years ago. Maybe somebody says, I need to go pick up my kids at the bus stop. And you could say, yes, and hey, let's get our snack ready first. Oh, okay, let's do that. It gives them something to do. It's not just a verbal yes and, but you add on to it. I don't want to go to the doctor. Yes, and I understand. I don't like to go to the doctor's office either. Maybe it is empathizing with the person, letting them know that you understand how they feel, putting that feeling back to them so they understand that you're there with them, holding their hand the whole way. So yes and can say, I understand. It can say, I hear you. It can say, I know how you feel. It can also validate what the person is saying. It can also empathize, and it can also agree. So yes and is a powerful little tool to put in your pocket. And Another tool when you're thinking about communication is remembering that behavior is a form of communication, and that it's also behavior can be an expression of something that that person needs. And that if you start from more of a place of normal, no matter what condition the person has that you're caring for, that can be a better place to start from. So, for instance, let's say that you are caring for someone that's living with dementia, and you walk into their room in the morning, and you walk over to the curtains and you open the curtains and you say, "Good morning, Mom, it's time to get up." Mom stirs a little bit. So you walk over to the bed and you start to take her covers off. Now, Mom's laying there and she's starting to wake up, but she's not quite sure where she is. She's not quite sure who you are, except some person that is taking her covers off, and she only has her nightgown on. And she didn't feel she was ready to get up. How would you feel? You might try to hit the person or yell at the person or say, "Go away," or get mad. That's a normal way to react if someone that you don't quite recognize is trying to wake you up. So remember, we have to start from a place and know that a lot of what the person is doing is quite normal. We just all of a sudden think it's abnormal if they have a condition or a disease. And oh, I love this little cartoon here. You know, really, what's normal? So, is sometimes you also have to think about behavior in the sense that, is it their behavior or is it our behavior? That our behavior is what they're reacting to, and that we have to be fully aware of how we are acting. Because sometimes if a person isn't acting normal to us, then we think it's a problem. We think it has to be managed. But really, maybe you should think about, whose problem is this? Who is it hurting? Is it a matter of health or safety? For instance, if a person is shredding some napkins at the table, is that hurting anybody? I don't think so. So what's the reason you have to stop it? And it might be quite normal. If I was sitting waiting for an interview for a job and maybe there was napkins there, I might shred them up too if I was feeling a little bit nervous. So why not just don't worry about the why of why this is happening for the person? Why not just redirect? Why not just distract them and move on? Well, if you don't think about the why behind a person's behavior, of what they're trying to communicate or what they're trying to get across to you or what they might need, then you're just slapping a Band-Aid on. And that might help for those few minutes. That might help for an hour, maybe for the day, but it might come back. But if you can figure out the why behind it, it can make such a big difference, because you can help that person feed that need that they are having, whether it is trying to communicate something to you or it is something that they are trying to say or they need. So another point of communication is to be patient. Be patient. I mean, really patient. He's being really patient. And it's not easy to be patient. And I think that it's no wonder they say patience is a virtue, because it's not an easy thing to do. So before you speak, maybe take a moment. Take a breath. Just relax a little bit. Maybe know that when it's their turn to speak, to give a minute, to give a pause, to look them right in the eye and truly listen as hard and deep as you can. And patience is a skill that will improve all parts of your life, not only caregiving. You just have to practice it. You have to be aware of it and practice it. Practice when you're sitting in traffic. Practice when you're standing in a line. Practice when you're in a line at the grocery store and you should have gotten that line, but you're stuck in this line. Practice feeling that patience and taking those breaths. Who cares who sees you do it? It's good for you in all aspects of your life. You might find that you think you'll never be patient because you keep kind of losing it a little bit, but it'll come. One day, your ability to be patient will just show up, kind of like your in-laws. And if you find yourself getting frustrated, just give yourself a timeout. Literally, excuse yourself from the situation, walk out of the room, walk outside, maybe just walk around the corner for a little bit. Even counting to 10 can help the situation. Now, another improv guideline is to go with the flow. And basically what that means is no matter what's happening, you just go with the flow, right? My daughter and my mom were sitting at the dining room table one day, and she was doing her homework, and mom was doing her word search, and Grace had on her iPod at the time, the Beatles. And if you think about it, the Beatles are great for people with any kind of memory loss because the Beatles just repeats the same lines. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold. They just keep saying the same lines over and over. So they're sitting there, and all of a sudden the song ends, and my mom says to Grace, "Who was that? Who was that singing?" And Grace says, "The Beatles." And my mom says, "Oh, I dated them." And I'm in the living room folding laundry. And I could see on Grace's face, this 10-year-old face of, oh, I want to, I know she didn't. There's no way she dated the Beatles. There's no way she even knew any of the Beatles. And she wanted to say it so bad. But this awesome little 10-year-old said, really? What was that like? She literally went with the flow. What could have been the benefit to say, there's no way, Grandma, you didn't know the Beatles? No benefit except to maybe make her a little bit upset. So instead, they had this great conversation about the Beatles and which one was her favorite, Ringo, how horrible it was when these teenagers followed them screaming. So going with the flow is not lying to the person. It's going with the thought that the person has and going along with them. So go with the flow is one of the guidelines. The next guideline that kind of feeds into that is step into their world. So that's even harder for family members because what we're saying is leave your world here. Just leave it right here and take that step and just one step into their world. Appreciate what their truth is. Appreciate what they like now, what they want to do now. There is no reason to just pull somebody into our world. And that's what we do quite a bit. We end up trying to just yank them back by saying, Mom, don't you remember? I saw the lady that used to live next door to us when we were growing up. I can't remember her name, but I recognize, you remember her name, right? And that's trying to pull her back. So instead, take a step and say, I saw our wonderful neighbor. It was so sweet. She said to say hello to you. There's no reason that we need to constantly be pulling them instead of stepping into their world. So this is a great quote, Maya Angelou. When we know better, we do better. And it's not easy, but you are the ones that have to change. We are the ones that have to change. We have to make sure that we are doing the best we can once we know better for our loved ones. What triggers behavior to happen? We talk about that all the time, but what triggers joy? One little thing you can do is just smile. 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 Smile, 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 smile. I love that one. Smile, smile. That can start it. Smiling's contagious. You can't help it when you see somebody else smile. It's a little thing that you can start that even if you aren't feeling it, just try it. You'll help spread a little joy. And also, remember that you're awesome. I mean, come on. You guys are all awesome. You are. Yeah, and you down there in the front, and you way back there. You're awesome. You are. I promise. And you are awesome. So thank you for listening to me today, and have a great rest of your conference.